Welcome to another federal mobility policy update. We're here to update you on what's been going on with regards to the crisis in transportation. Today, we've got some esteemed guests. We've got Beth Osborne from Transportation for America. Hi, Beth.
Hello.
We've got Karen Whitaker from the League of American Bicyclists. Good morning or good afternoon. And we have my colleague, my colleague and coworker, we have Martha Osowski from Further Strategies. Martha represents a collaborative of funders working on the intersection of access to transportation and health. So let's go over quickly what's been happening. After a grueling 2-day, 36-hour markup, the House Transportation Committee advanced its $494 billion surface transportation bill, which determines funding for the next 5 years. It's going to be part of a larger $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan. Let's get from our panelists, what are the good, the bad, and the uglies of what we just witnessed for the last 36 hours? Who wants to start?
So I'll start.
Okay.
I think for the good, there were real significant changes to the safety portion, which will help bicyclists and pedestrians, and also the local control portion. For the bad, I'd say they changed the zero emissions to include natural gas. And I would say for the ugly, there was significant partisanship and just some silly amendments and arguments that really held back the process and the sense of cooperation.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Karen said. I would say, from our perspective at Transportation for America, the good includes that the bill now makes significant progress on all of our priorities, including safety, which was made better through the amendment process, including emphasis on repairing existing infrastructure before you build new infrastructure. That included a big amendment win. And the bad, it's more what still needs to be fixed. And I think one of the things we really need to tackle is, as we are fixing existing infrastructure, making sure that we're not just repaving, we're actually making it safer, better, more accommodating to more types of travelers, not just drivers. And then the ugly is that, while this is an excellent way to make the current program much better, we're not really talking about changing the existing construct to deal with the long-term multi-generational damage we've done through our highway program in the past, through the implementation of urban renewal policies that wrecked communities of color across the nation. We're not talking about fixing that or addressing that. We're not talking about making transit funding the same as highway funding, except for Representative Garcia, which we'll get into. Those are the big things we need to get to next.
Great. Martha, did you want to add anything from what you saw from your perch?
No, I am encouraged that in the midst of all of the chaos and everything else that's going on, that we really did see a decent bill come out of the House, and then the ability to make it even better. Mm-hmm. I realize that's just one step in the process, and then we're headed into the Senate, but it's encouraging. Another thing I'd like to touch on here as we talk is, does this supersede all of the stimulus recovery bills, or are those still in play, or is this where the focus has gone for anything for transportation moving forward?
Good. Let's unpack all of that and start with Martha's question. So where does this stand in relation to the stimulus recovery bills that have moved previously?
So
Who wants to take that question? Go ahead.
We saw yesterday that Speaker Pelosi framed this transportation bill as part of a larger infrastructure stimulus piece. So I think they've been brought together, and my understanding from the House is that they may also do stimulus that includes transportation as well as this. In the Senate, they're not talking about stimulus at all. So this may push them to do their transportation bill.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add that the House is pushing very hard on a broad-based plan that covers all kinds of different infrastructure, but it really goes against what Leader McConnell said would be palatable to him, which is something very connected to the COVID crisis and connected to the economic crisis. And a 5-year bill that will spend out over 10 years it kind of violates both of those things. So I think in some ways it puts more pressure on the Senate to do something, but it probably doesn't get the Senate any closer to the proposal that the House is putting up.
But if I'm correct, we don't currently have a 5-year plan for funding transportation. We're behind in that. Is that right? So that if we don't have a transportation funding proposal, then we're kind of stuck.
I mean, they could bring up a standalone recovery bill like the CARES Act, like the HEROES Act, that sort of thing. And then the question is whether or not this gets connected to it, whether it's a standalone bill. There's a lot of things they could do, but they have to come to some level of agreement on what they're going to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had some smaller recovery bills that extend this program and push it into next year. And then depending on what happens to the election, I think that there will be a lot of push to do something early in the new Congress.
Karen, is there any funding currently in this proposal, this markup, that tries to preserve what's been gained through temporary bicycle infrastructure?
There's nothing that goes directly to what we're seeing in sort of in the short-term piece, but there's nothing that stops it either. And so the decision for that is really at the local level. And I know that advocates have really been pushing to get that temporary infrastructure in now with the goal of keeping it permanent in the future.
Yeah,
Great.
Karen, can you speak to, you had talked about improvements to safety. I mean, our system, we've seen deaths in vehicles tick down a little bit, but deaths of pedestrians and bicyclists tick up. What is the safety progress that you're excited about? What happened?
Sure. So right now, bicycling and walking make up 12% of transportation trips, 20% of fatalities, and get less than 1% of safety dollars. What the underlying bill did was hold states accountable for that and say you have to have a plan on how you're going to fix things. And the states that are above the median, basically 25 states, would have to put money towards fixing that. What happened in the markup was two things. One, metropolitan areas now also have to have a plan, and if you're above average, you have to address it. And then Representative Lynch from Massachusetts added in a national road safety assessment that the Federal Highways Administration has to go out and identify all of the areas that are dangerous for bicycling and walking or are perceived as dangerous. And make suggestions on how to do that. And there'll be a national database of all of these dangerous road areas, which gives advocates a huge tool to say, hey, this is dangerous. Why aren't you fixing it?
But isn't that like 98% of our system?
Yes. Yes. I'd add a couple other things. It prohibits states and metropolitan planning organizations from setting targets to do worse in safety, which we have to say, apparently. But it does say that now, and there's some punishment for failing to meet your safety targets now, which is good.
So these are federal safety targets that will be set up and you should explain to some of our audience what a metropolitan planning organization is.
Yes, it's just a regional transportation entity. We don't travel within jurisdictions. We travel throughout a metropolitan region. So we've created these entities to plan for the whole region that includes all the jurisdictions within it. And they're referred to as metropolitan planning organizations or MPOs.
Yeah, and they are responsible in part for distributing federal dollars, correct?
That's right. And for determining the priority list for the region and for doing a lot of the analysis, like a lot of the modeling is done at the MPO level rather than at the state level. So basically, as of the recent the FAST Act, which is the existing law, or I'm sorry, MAP 21 that came even before that in 2012, states had to set performance targets and safety, fatalities on your roadways, fatality rate, serious injury rate. And thanks to the work of Karen and a lot of her partner organization, a specific one that was added later for bicyclists and pedestrians. States have to set targets for theoretically for improving it, but they were taking it from a very different perspective of what did they think was going to happen, as if it was happening to them, and that was the target they'd set. And now this says, no, you actually have to set a target to make it better. So there's some significant things in the bill.
So it feels like this is a different approach. At least that's what the leadership in the House has been saying, that this is more climate focused. How realistic and is that? I know there's been some conversation about promoting natural gas. Who wants to try to tackle that question?
Yeah, is this a climate bill? Is this a climate friendly bill we can all rally behind?
I mean, I think it does a lot on climate. We actually did a whole post that kind of went through all of the different things in the bill that affect climate, some of which aren't called climate, that climate isn't even a word in the bill, but still has really positive impacts. Now, does it do everything for climate that it should? No, there's more that we could certainly do, but there are some great things in here. Yeah, it requires DOTs and those metropolitan planning organizations to track greenhouse gas emissions. So they now have to set a greenhouse gas emission standard or target as well, and consider whether or not their program of projects gets them closer to that. There is, we've talked about some of the funding for recharging stations and refueling stations. It's been made eligible in existing programs, and there's a program specifically to deploy recharging stations with some significant money in it. It supports transit with more money, and there's better policy behind that transit, focusing on service and not population, which means you're rewarded for providing more service, not just for having a low cost transit system in a high population area. It supports biking and walking. That doesn't necessarily say climate, but it has climate implications. So there's a lot of things in here that people should get very excited about on climate.
But I heard that there was from Karen, you were talking about natural gas earlier when we were talking.
Yeah. I just wanted to expand a little bit on what Beth said about it going throughout the bill. That is something fairly new. When we're talking about transportation policy, in the past, there's been this little congestion mitigation and air quality program, but everything else worked against it.
Yes.
This bill puts reducing greenhouse gases in the goal of, I think, almost every program. The other thing they want to do, or that it does on planning, is that for every single grant program, every application is going to be judged on its inclusive participation process and how it affects equity and how it affects environmental justice.
That's great.
And having that throughout is great. Now, what I mentioned as bad is that the original bill had to change the low-no program, which was for low and no emission, to zero emissions buses, and really encouraged areas to buy whole fleets, not just buy a one-off here or there, but buy a whole fleet. One of the compromises we saw made in the last couple of days is to include natural gas buses into that.
To make them eligible for funding as opposed to just saying singularly electric vehicles.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's already a bus program which you can buy natural gas buses in, and you can buy full gas buses in, and that's one area I think we could improve on. If this is really a goal to electrify the fleet, then let's just make it possible for everyone to buy more efficient vehicles, and you just don't get to buy the least efficient vehicle anymore. But we haven't quite made it all the way there.
So with this proposal, we're going to see 5 years of funding more or less distributed at a federal level to local governments and to states and MPOs to determine how to spend that money. On the ground, what do you think funders could potentially be seeing? More buses, more freeways, newer freeways? I think I heard you say that the first priority is to repair what we have. Is that accurate?
Well, thanks to the leadership of Representative Chuy Garcia from Chicago and Representative Gallagher from Wisconsin, they introduced a bill or an amendment that would tighten up repair first language that includes a language that says that if you're going to, well, first the underlying bill says you have to have shown progress in reaching a state of repair before you can build new infrastructure, and you have to show that you've analyzed whether or not it's the most cost-effective approach, first considering operational changes, which are very inexpensive, and a transit investment first. We added a language that says that you also have to have a plan for operating and maintaining that new asset while maintaining your whole system. So it's not like you're doing well today and we'll let you go build a whole bunch of things that will just put you back in the soup. And so with that, I think that we've made some very good progress, and there are certainly other things we can do. Like I said, don't just replace the pavement, make the whole design of it better would be a nice next step. But I'm hoping some of the things that we've done on safety and that Karen's really led on safety for non-motorized travelers can impact how those repairs are done.
So Karen, go ahead. I was going to ask you. Go ahead.
There's an awkward situation we're in now because of COVID-19, yes, where the bill continues the existing program for another year. So when you ask what our planner is going to see on the ground, the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be more of the same until these new programs get into play. It's a hard situation. It's hard for the committee to say, we're going to put in all new programs, which is going to slow money going out when we're at this situation. But this bill is looking long-term.
Well, and in fairness to them, as someone who managed MAP 21 at USDOT, new programs require rules and regulations and systems, and they just take a while to put together. So you can say you're going to start this on day one, but until those regulations come down, it won't. So it's really just recognizing that it takes a little bit of time. And look, by the time this bill actually, if this bill were to be adopted by the Senate and signed into law by the president, that could be a year away. I don't know where we will be on COVID and what we will need. So as we go through this, we're going to have to revisit where we are and think about that.
And as advocates, one of our jobs is to make sure those states are ready for
yes,
these, that they're working on these new programs through the first year. So when day one of year two comes,
they're ready.
So 2 more questions. Briefly, what happens now? Pretty good bill coming out of the House. Is it done in the House? Now we wait for Senate action? What happens?
No, and it's not an easy answer. It's supposed to go to the floor. It never is. It's supposed to go to the floor. I'd love to hear what Karen's hearing because we haven't had a chance to talk offline. But the goal that they had was July 1st. And traditionally, it would need a research title out of the Science Committee and a financing title out of the Ways and Means Committee, neither of which are going to be ready to produce that by July 1st. So I think we're waiting to see what the plan is to get those portions of the bill ready so it can go to the House floor.
Okay. So actually, Ways and Means hopes to have their title out today.
Oh, well, there you go.
So that should be ready to move on. We are watching to see if the Bicycle Commuter Act gets included in that. So it would reinstate the bicycling commuter benefit, which is why I've been watching it. So they've set June 30th for a markup on the House on the floor. So
let's revisit that. The bicycle commuter benefit is a tax credit that an employer can give you, or an amount of money that an employer can give you without having to pay taxes on it. Is that correct?
So this bill will change what we had before. So the bike benefit will work the same way the transit benefit is. So as an employee, you can choose to have that money taken out pre-tax. And what's great about this bill is that you'll be able to use it in concert with a transit benefit or a parking benefit or both. We had one before, but you had to either choose transit or biking or park. You couldn't use biking with the others, and it really depressed use. But this will also include bike share memberships.
That's great.
Well, so can I jump in with one more question?
Do, yeah.
In talking with funders, they often ask, they'll say, I'm going to meet with my member of Congress. A lot of them have relationships with their member of Congress. What should I say to them? And realize funders don't get involved in lobbying, and we're not going to be able to give them information about, the particulars of this bill because things change so quickly. So it seems like what do they say? I mean, I think they say the House bill is good. There's a lot of good things in it. We hear good things about the House bill, but also this fact that, as Daryl alludes to, we're still dealing with a system that plays 8-track tapes, and we really need a fundamental rethink of the whole system that I know won't happen in this bill, but can we start laying the groundwork? Can we start elevating that this system, like so many in our country, is fundamentally broken and needs a complete rethink? Is there something in that space that would be helpful if we all started to say and raise to the surface?
Karen, I like how you talk about this. Why don't you take the first hit?
So I think whenever we're looking at big social change and we're asking people to say, are you with us or against us? We're going to increase the opposition to that big change, but we're also going to increase the proponents and the people advocating with us. And so we need to be ready to be bold and say, this is a good first step. We need to go much further, and we need to start talking now about what that future looks like.
And the reason I love how Karen puts that is because we're already seeing the opposition line up. Look, people don't like doing things differently from the way they've always done things. That's natural. And I know Representative DeFazio has felt great blowback, but what makes him decide to keep trying to do something different is that he has the proponents. So being that as a funder, just saying doing something bold is worth it, and helping support those local groups that can go to their congressman and say, yeah, I like this, helps them stand against the status quo that wants things to never change.
And curiously enough, we have a fund that we're launching. Martha, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
We are launching the Mobility Matching Fund, and the idea is that a pool of funders have put up some national money to match with local foundation contributions to power the local advocacy groups, the nonprofits who are making the case for transit, who are making the case for biking and walking, making the case for pricing, parking, and getting involved in these decisions about how that federal money gets spent at a local level. It's frustrating because it's dispersed. The decision making is very diffused, but luckily we've got really smart people on the ground in communities across the country, backing up the good work that you guys are doing at a federal level. So we encourage funders to contribute to this fund. There's still time. We're in a transit crisis. We didn't touch on that at all, but it's, there's a lot of moving parts right now and we need your help.
Thanks. That's great. And we'll put the information on how to contact everyone at the end of the show. We've got 2 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about what you see people, what do people need to know in the next month, recognizing that we're looking at July 1st. There will be a break, if memory serves it correctly, and members of Congress will be going back to their districts. People go to events. What should people, without lobbying, what should people express as general intent? We've talked a little bit about that, but quick hits, like we started with quick hits, let's end with what are the 2 or 3 points you need that we out in the field should be mentioning to members and elected officials?
The way Transportation for America approached it this time was to talk about what the outcomes are that we want to see in the bill. We don't want to hear about how much money is being spent. We want to hear about what that will get us. And what we want to know is the system will be in a better state of repair. Not that we hope it will by the spending, but we have proof that that the money will go there. That safety will improve specifically with regard to addressing the impact of speed on our roadways, on our most vulnerable users, and that we will reorganize the program around connecting people to equitable access to opportunity. So talking in those outcomes is the way to go. So if it's climate for you, say it's not about the money, it's about whether or not the money gets me better outcomes on climate. And that's not about any particular legislation.
That's great. That's great. Karen.
And I think we've heard about one of the effects of COVID is that it exacerbates the problems that are already there.
Yes.
And so Beth talked about that connectivity to jobs and destinations, and how that is hardest for the people with the least and in under-resourced communities.
Yeah.
And so every step we take to improve that is important. And we need to push that forward and keep that front of mind because people are thinking differently. And the decisions that we make in the next year or two on transportation is going to affect us for the next decade.
That's great. That's great. Martha, would you like to add anything?
Great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. I just want to flag that we have reached out to Representative Garcia's office and hope to have him on the next call or an upcoming call. He's a busy man after whatever 36 hours on the floor on the markup, but really thinking about the future of transportation, you know, bigger picture, how we reform these programs. So stay tuned.
Great. And thank you both. Thank you all three for participating. We'll hope to see you again soon, probably in the next week to 2 weeks. If you like this video, like it and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.